There you go.
Yeah, or the teachers. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
So TJ, are we good? Are we still waiting?
Yeah.
We're good? Okay,
Oh,
great.
thanks.
Great, okay. Welcome everybody to the December 16th, 2020 school committee meeting, the last of 2020. Thank you for coming. We are live streaming this meeting and we are also recording it tonight. Oh, thank you. Arete is joining us via phone tonight, and Joe can't make us due to a scheduling conflict. Can't make the meeting due to a scheduling conflict. Moving to item B, item B. Item C, those were my remarks. Item C, comments from the audience. As you know, when we're doing our in-person meetings, we ask for emails for the comments from the audience part, and I did not receive any this week. We have, though, received, I would say, a lot of feedback and comments via our subcommittee meetings that we've had over the past 2 weeks, and we will hear about that more with the subcommittee updates at the end of the meeting, towards the end of the meeting. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the Student Advisory Board report. Tonight we have Olivia Dunham with us.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Dunham, the class of 2021 SAB. I just wanted to give a quick update on the happenings in the school. The senior class has been working on a staff raise fundraiser to help raise money for caps and gowns, as we do not have a lot of money saved right now due to the loss of our social events. School-wide, this week we have been running our virtual Spirit Week. Today was Boston Sports Day, as you can probably tell by my Patriots apparel. This has helped bring some school spirit and some normalcy to the year. Next week, we'll also be hosting our virtual pep rally to boost morale and give a nice holiday vacation send-off. Last week, the Student Council hosted a student forum. It had about 40 attendees, some from each grade level. Some feedback we received was requests to bring back lockers because with weather getting colder, students are struggling carrying all their winter gear around. Another request was for second quarter to try to reintroduce a rotating schedule. I know we've had a lot of schedule change recently, but some students have been having issues not being able to give 100% due to certain classes at one time every single day. We'd like to thank you for implementing a win block back into the schedule. This has received a lot of positive feedback and is found to be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that you offered that student forum to get feedback from everybody. That's excellent. You told me you did it during one of the WIN.
Yeah, we posted it during the win block. We've been trying to utilize that the best we can. That's also when we're going to have our virtual pep rally. So We're trying to reach out to students using the win block.
How much money do you need to raise for the seniors?
I believe we need I think we're short like 1,000 maybe.
1,000, is that what you're saying?
I believe so, yeah. Or I gotta check on the numbers on that.
Yeah.
We're still just trying to raise as much money as possible so we can do class gifts and other stuff too. So,
Yeah.
But I'll get back to you with the numbers.
Okay, all right. Yeah, maybe we can help you raise money. I have not helped you directly. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Liz? All right. We will move on to item E, the middle school principal report with Bill McManus.
So we'll be sharing the school improvement plan with you tonight, and I'm just going to put it up here on the screen, although everyone already has it. So I'll announce the school advisory council names who worked on this with me. Assistant Principal Gavin Monagle. Then for our faculty members, Lois Afro, who joins me tonight, one of our math teachers. She teaches math in the 8th grade. Andrew Bopel from Social Studies and Courtney Monaco from math as well. For parents, Jennifer Beers, Christine Bolzan, Marshall Hook, who's here with us tonight, and Jonathan Whetstone. So the school improvement plan, the focus this year really was on creating something that was reasonable and attainable given the COVID pandemic and all of the other constraints that we have on operating school this year, as well as realizing we want something that we can achieve this year given many different factors that are influencing school. So the first one focuses on connecting student experiences in learning to the real world, and then students participating in interdisciplinary learning assignments and lessons. This is something that I adapted from last year's school improvement plan. As you know, with what happened last year in the pandemic, the school improvement plan wasn't fully realized since school took on a very different shape for the last third of the school year. So I'm going to ask Lois to talk a little bit about that. She has implemented some interdisciplinary learning in her math class, and we'll talk more about how it's going to work in the middle school.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. Obviously, this year we've had to do the best we can under the circumstances, but we've been fortunate enough to pull off a couple of interesting projects. One of them was when we hit the math concept of slope. We asked our students to take their English knowledge and do some research on the Americans with Disabilities Act and learn about the construction of wheelchair ramps. And we asked many of them to go to public buildings. Most of them went to the town halls in the 3 different towns and actually measured ramps, took pictures of it, reported on it, combined it with their research, fought us on the idea of doing citations, but we made them do it. And they did a really nice job. That was a little bit more at the honors level. At the college prep level, we're kind of hitting this concept right now. So next week, while they're home, we're actually going to have them do some measurements in their own homes of stairs, banisters, anything with slopes. We preceded that with some construction videos. I think that showed this old house, which actually was filmed in Boston. So the kids kind of got a kick out of that. And we had huge discussions and had them research why we have peaked roofs and the snow and the rain. And then the question was asked, why does a building like this have a flat roof? We talked about the costs, and so we got into a lot of business models. But we're trying to combine some research with the math, and that's just one small example of some of the things we're doing this year. We wish we can do more, but it's kind of hard not to have them move around and work collaboratively and go from class to class. But we do have a lot of ideas, and this is just a little sampling of them. It's been fun.
Do the kids kind of get into it? You know,
They
with
really
these
do.
things?
And it's a little switch up from what they think is a typical math class.
Right.
So I think they really embrace it a lot. And the fact that they can do it whether they're home or in school and connect their math to the real world makes it more meaningful, and hopefully they'll retain it a little bit better. So far so good.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lois. And that's one example of how math is working with the interdisciplinary learning and real-world learning. There are other units and activities that take place throughout the school and throughout the classes as well. The second one has to do, our second goal has to do with social-emotional learning and building off that culture of good citizenship and the culture of kindness that's been established in the middle school. We felt that it was very important to touch upon that this year in the school improvement plan because SEL has been at the forefront of many people's minds in ensuring that students are able to learn and that we are addressing the concerns and the anxieties that they have this year with the school year, whether they're hybrid or whether they're fully remote. So the 2 goals are evaluation and implementation of school-wide programming to support citizenship, patience, and resiliency. You'll recognize that tied into my school year themes that I laid out for the committee at the beginning of the school year. Some of the things that we've done with that, this week we did a greeting card project with students, holiday greeting cards that were created for the 3 councils on aging in the 3 towns, and then for the Masconomet Healthcare Center in Topsfield. So students created over 150 cards, and we made all those cards available, not all the cards, but we divided the cards and packaged them up, and then Jennifer Beers from the SAC is delivering them to those 3 places or 4 places this week. We had good participation from students. We had quite a few cards dropped off from students who were at home, and then a lot of cards that were created by students in the building. And for a first effort in a hybrid model environment, I think that worked pretty well, so that tied right into the citizenship piece well. And then incorporating the WIN block, and we've heard a lot about WIN. Students are very happy with it. There's been good feedback from teachers as well, so that's been going well in school. I want to invite Marshall to talk more about the SEL piece and how this ties in from a parent perspective.
Yeah, you've got it all there, so I'm not going to go through it. I will say that when we were discussing this as a council, I don't want to speak for all parents, but I feel like the most kind of animated the conversation got from the parent side was in this part. Obviously, academics are the core mission of a school, but what I think makes it a more robust educational, holistic experience is this kind of stuff. Like, they're going to learn their math and their English and all of that, but we also want them to learn to be good people, which is, I think, more important now, not only with, the political and social climate that is out there, but just the extra pressures that kids face in the time of social media and the intra-school pressures. All of this kind of speaks to that. And it's a thing that parents really have a difficult time helping with. I mean, I'm not going to be able to help any kid with math, no matter what. But I don't know many parents that can really delve into this the way it can be done in a school with their peers, in that WIN block, with those groups, with counselors, all of that. And so that's why, from a parental standpoint, I think we were wildly supportive of this and really looking forward to its implementation.
Good. Marshall, if you had Lois for math in 8th grade, you might be able to help more with math.
5 years to get there, 2 years development. There's still time.
Before you, Bill,
Yes.
you wanted to switch the slide in case.
Oh, yes. Thanks.
Following along at home. We
Sure.
have it on our laptop.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, and then the last one here is focusing on technology and using technology to support teachers and students to maximize learning in the hybrid environment. We're already doing this year. Last year, technology was part of the school improvement plan. This year, it's really taken a front seat role, obviously, in what we're doing here, and it's a major component of the remote learning plan, hybrid learning plan. And teachers have had to dive right in. We supported it with 2 weeks of professional development, 10 school days to start the school year. And specifically, we had 6 days of digital learning planned and delivered as far as PD, two teachers at the beginning of the school year. And that was instrumental in helping us to be able to get the year started and begin the remote learning for the first month of school, and then obviously continuing through the school year. They reviewed and retaught previously taught software programs and platforms. We already had Blackboard in place, but a lot more robust PD around it took place. Teachers have been experimenting with different apps. They've been trying various technology kinds of tools and methods to use with their students, and it's definitely been a progress in learning for figuring out the best way to deliver material electronically. And I have to say that teachers have done well with it so far, and they'll continue to experiment as the year goes on. That wraps up the school improvement plan, so I'll open it up for questions that people might have on this.
So,
Yes.
In trying to get by, in this environment, trying different things, have people come up with things that would be utilized even if we go back to normal?
Oh, I can answer that.
Sure, Lois, go ahead.
Yes. One of the things we discovered a little bit last spring, and we're going to use a lot more, is Desmos, which is an online graphing tool. And we realized that even though in the middle school they need to go through the foundations of graphing and modeling and things like that, once they get the hang of it, you can speed them up by putting it online. And Desmos has been really nice where we haven't started it yet. We're actually in the chapter where it might get started. But that's a tool that I can see us using going forward, absolutely. The online textbooks, I can only speak to math, but we've tapped into more resources than we actually even knew existed in our textbook because we've been forced to, and that's been really helpful. Some of the software, like Edpuzzle, I think was used in other subjects, and we decided to try it in math, and the ability to edit a YouTube, edit out the commercials, edit out maybe some inappropriate words, and then still make it an educational tool. We will definitely use that going forward. So just in math, and that's a very small look, we've definitely found things that we will keep in our toolbox going forward. So that's been really, that's been a plus.
Also, I even add, one of the interesting things that sort of struck me as I was going through this presentation a couple days ago was, about a year ago, Mr. Dillon and I were having a discussion about when the middle school was going to become a one-to-one school. It all happened and we missed it. Those are the kinds of things, and it's a question, that Dr. McManus and I are going to have to talk about is what happens in September.
Yes.
How are we going to be able to support and continue that? Because, as I said, we went one-to-one in the middle school and nobody noticed that it happened. And I think it would be a step backwards if we didn't continue that. So it's another one that just is pretty interesting that it forced us to act, and probably sooner than we were even, than definitely we were thinking about it. But it seems to be working pretty well, and we can hear from teachers that those things are enhancing our instruction.
Anyone else? I have a question for Ms. Afro. So when we heard about the high school improvement plan, we talked to those teachers a little bit about the tools that they have to teach this year, and we heard a little bit about Blackboard in that discussion. And then we also are getting some feedback from parents about their perceived shortcomings of Blackboard. So while we have you, would you mind if we ask you how effective Blackboard is for you as a teacher, as a tool?
It's funny that you're asking me, and I can really just answer for me. I am not a tech person, and I've put in unbelievable amounts of hours, and I'm feeling a lot more comfortable with it. We're going to find the positives and the negatives with everything, but I feel like we're doing the best possible job we can with our students under these circumstances, and I feel compared to the little bits I hear of other school districts, we're doing okay. It's really hard. It's hard for us. It's, I think, hard for the students. Everybody just wishes we can rip the masks off and just do school. But we can't, and I think we're managing. But it is incredibly hard, and we've got an amazing staff who help each other, and including our IT people. They're like heaven sent. And I think without the support of each other, it would be even more difficult. So there's some people who take to the technology very quickly and have just been so helpful. And there's other ones of us, we just put in the time and we get there. And we try and make it as user-friendly for the students so they can, at least from the math perspective, they can just click and they don't need to go to 18 different sites, stay on the one, and they can link to everything that they need. And we've really worked a lot behind the scenes to do that. And the students in math have been really appreciative of that. They tell us that we're predictable, which I take as a compliment. They tell us that they understand the flow of the class, which again, some people may think that they're being boring, but I think the students like the predictability. So the feedback from them has been super helpful. And, you know, I don't know other learning management systems to compare it to, but I really haven't had any problems. And I just do what I can do, and I try and learn a little bit more each time. And the support among the staff, I think, has really been helpful, including, you know, IT and our digital learning people, and that's been really, really helpful. I didn't hear all of your questions, so I hope I answered it enough.
Oh, yeah, we're at the furthest ends of the room, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you did, and I appreciate you sharing that with us, and.
Yeah, again, I can only speak for myself.
Oh, I know.
But we're managing.
Okay.
We need this vacation coming up. We really need it, but we're managing.
Thank you. Bonnie?
I had a question for you, Dr. McManus, about the SEL, or maybe even for Mr. Hook. When you talked about the shared language, like the common language that you're talking to the kids about, and then making sure that the staff are all having talking about the same terms, do you have any advice for parents wanting to continue that conversation, aside from asking their children and talking to them when they can about what citizenship vocabulary words you're delving into?
You're really putting me on the spot here, Bonnie. I mean, parental advice, it's a fine line to walk, right? The things that I'm harping on really with students and that we're talking about as far as being a good citizen is caring about your community, connecting with your classmates. How do we do that in a virtual environment? Some of the ways that we've provided for kids is we're running the Excel program. We're doing these virtual assemblies with the 7th and the 8th grade that Mr. Monaco and I run. As far as common vocabulary, it's the patience, resilience are two of the big ones, I would say. And then really that culture of kindness, and how do you exhibit that kindness? So if you harp on those, talk about those at home, what does that mean? How do you live that? How can you show that? That would be my advice. With that being said, not that I want to talk about day-to-day too much or discipline and everything. Mr. Monaco and I have had virtually no incidents with students this year. Part of that is because we're in a hybrid environment, but that's been one positive outcome.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else? Zilly has a question.
I was also curious, kind of pivoting back to the classroom experience. So since we have a math teacher here, I'll use math as the example. At the beginning of the year, there was conversation about, especially in the middle school, having the teams collaborate so that the students on each team are at a relatively equal pace, and you don't have some better prepared than others when they get to 9th grade. Are you finding that you are able to follow that through as the year continues?
Absolutely. We have PLC time, and again, I can use math as an example, but we've also been doing this for years. Even the way we've distributed the work, one of us takes the lead on the honors work and shares it. One of us takes the lead on the college prep work and shares it. And the other one does a lot of resources, like finding the YouTube videos and things like that. And I believe every department in their PLC time shares it. So if you went to my Blackboard page, Mrs. Clyde's Blackboard page on 8 blue, Mrs. Pickup's Blackboard page on 8 white, it would look exactly the same for math. And that's something we've always done in math, and I believe most of the other subject matters are doing it too, and that PLC time is so needed. We actually even meet, I think we're supposed to meet once a week or something. We just meet every day. We have to. We change things on the fly, and so we are pretty confident saying it doesn't matter which team you're on, you're getting the same education going into the high school.
Yeah, for instance, just anecdotally walking around classrooms and visiting classes, the 7th grade for the English classes, they were all reading The Most Dangerous Game short story and doing a unit around that at the same time. And the days were very closely aligned with each other across the classes. So yes, that is happening.
Awesome. And just for fun, I gotta tell you, my daughter was working on a science project today, 8th grade, all about slope. So, it wasn't a math project, it wasn't an English ADA research project, but they were building a roller coaster.
Great.
Very cool stuff.
It
We're
is.
seeing it at home. Any other questions? Okay, thanks everyone.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
thanks
you.
for coming in. Appreciate
Stay
it.
safe. Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks.
Okay, so we will move on to item F, the superintendent's update with Mike.
Which might need to commit to this.
Okay, let's start off with the latest COVID-19 update. We are continuing to see an increase in the number of positive student and staff COVID-19 cases. Since the last time I reported to all of you on December 2nd, we've had approximately 17 positive cases, and that's both the middle and the high school combined. On the good side of that, over 90% of these cases, like 16 out of 17, involve students or staff who were not in the building while they were contagious. This may be due to individuals either attending school remotely or being already in quarantine because of a close contact with a COVID positive individual prior to them testing positive themselves. We also continue to see large numbers of students and staff who are quarantined as close contacts. We continue our practice of calling together the members of our COVID response team when we do have a report of a COVID positive individual in our buildings for the purpose of identifying and notifying those who are close contacts of that positive individual. To date, we still do not have any evidence of any staff or student contracting COVID while in school. Our local public health officials tell us that most of the COVID spread that they're seeing is within households right now. And as we approach the holiday break, I'll ask that everyone follow the December holiday guidance from the Mass Department of Public Health, which asks Massachusetts residents to limit in-person celebrations to household members only, to postpone or cancel travel this holiday season, and to follow our state's current gathering and size limits and workplace safety standards. With the release of vaccines for COVID-19 coming in the new year, it looks like there's an end to this long fight in sight. Now more than ever, we need to maintain our vigilance so that everyone we know and love will still be with us next summer. Next up, the high school principal search update. So we're well underway in our search for the next principal of Masconomet High School. The position was posted on schoolspring.com and other job posting sites. We currently have around 20 applications for the position. The posting will close on January 4th. Assistant Superintendent Patty Bullard and Middle School Principal Phil McManus are leading our search committee, which will be responsible for interviewing applicants and selecting finalists. This screening committee is made up of 11 members of our high school community. It includes parents, teachers, department heads, and a student representative. Interviews will be conducted during the week of January 18th. And this past Monday, the 14th of December, I sent out surveys to our high school faculty, to high school parents, and high school students regarding the qualities that they would like to see in our next high school principal. The responses to these surveys will be shared with the members of the screening committee to help guide their selection of finalists. Those finalists will be invited to visit Masconomet High School during the week of January 25th. And those visits will consist of interview sessions with different members of the Masconomet High School community, including faculty, department heads, and students. And the visits will conclude with a virtual session for parents and community members that we'll hold in the evening. Everyone who meets with the candidates during the finalist interviews will be invited to provide written feedback to assist me in making a final decision. And we'll have more information on the actual schedule for those finalist visits sometime in January once we kind of get into the interview process a little further along. All right. News for tomorrow, just due to the predicted snowstorm, it's not snowing yet, right? We'll have a remote learning day for all students tomorrow, Thursday, December 17th. No students or faculty will physically attend school. We're going to follow our regular hybrid class schedule for the day. School offices will also be physically closed, and office and administrative personnel will also work from home. If the storm causes widespread power outages, we may need to change the plan and cancel outright. So fingers crossed that we don't have to. I'll be monitoring the conditions overnight, and we'll communicate any changes to our plan in the morning. Dr. Morrison and I are trying to make sure we stay on the same course with whatever we do. Friday, December 18th is an A day, so students in cohort A will be back in school in person that day. And then for next week, Monday and Tuesday will also be remote learning days for students in all grades 7 through 12. Students in our LRC programs will be attending in person for both of those days. School will be closed for students and faculty beginning Wednesday, December 23rd, and we will reopen on Monday, January 4th, 2021. Cohort B will be in person that day on January 4th. Finally, I'd like to take the opportunity to wish everyone a happy holiday and hopefully for better days ahead in 2021.
Thank you. Is the search for the high school principal, are you following pretty much the same thing you did when you searched for Bill?
Yeah, it's the same, general outline that I always follow. It's pretty much the process I've used every time I've hired a principal. This is, I think, my 5th principal hire or something like that. So, actually 6th. And the only wrinkle in all this is how do we do some of this stuff remotely? So, we can't have an open house and invite the parents in at night, so we're going to have to do something on Zoom. We're going to have to figure out how to hold a forum for faculty. And so Patty and I Phil are kind of discussing, what is that going to look like? The same thing with
site visits are always.
Site visits are just kind of strange, because usually it's a series of 1-hour meetings with different groups, and so we're going to have to figure out how we structure that day to be different. And the initial interviews are going to be on Zoom too, so it's a little different. So
the forums, the parent forums will probably be better attended than not.
probably,
Yeah.
it'll be easier for people to attend, that's for sure.
Yeah.
How is the market? Like, are there a lot of principals moving around?
I haven't
Superintendents have to
seen
stay
a
put.
lot of jobs open right now. There's a couple that I know of. It's not,
Okay.
and this is the time that they
Right.
tend to come open, so.
We were having that conversation a couple of weeks ago, wondering if people would be willing to move or would want to stay put given all the things that are going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as I said, there's
20's pretty good.
There's 20
Yeah,
names
I was
in
thinking
the
that was
queue
pretty
right
good.
now, so, and we still have another couple of weeks. Usually a lot of times people, just because of the holidays, they'll take the time and apply. And when they have the time of vacation, they
Yeah.
put the information together, so.
Okay. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Great.
I was just going to quickly ask, is the student member typical, or is that new this year? Was there a student member of
There
the
was not a student
selection?
member on the middle school screening committee, and it's really more because of the age of the students,
Okay.
where, so I did ask a high school student to be a member of the committee, and that student accepted. I don't want to give names out.
Yeah,
'cause
no,
it's-
that's great. I love it.
I'm always hesitant to give out the names of the people on the committee because I don't want people lobbying them. It's always a hard position to be in there, so.
Yeah.
I tell everybody after the interviews are over who was on the committees, but we have a high school senior.
Great.
That's great.
Who's going to be on the committee.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Probably guess who it is. Everybody right now is. texting them for a kid. So,
All right, great. Thank you, Mike. We will move on to the FY21 financial forecast with Jeff.
you want this up there?
Yeah, why don't you throw it up there if you don't mind?
No problem.
Thank you. People. So I presented the first forecast for the year back on October 7th, the night we confirmed moving to hybrid. And I'm going to use the same format that I used in that first presentation back in October. So basically, I wanted to pull it apart into pieces. So first, I prepared a forecast without the impacts of COVID, and then layered in the estimated impacts from COVID, including unforeseen expenditures, anticipated changes in revenue sources, and then a proposed usage of excess and deficiency. So just to highlight that last bullet, so the proposed usage of E&D, the recommendation is to quote unquote balance the budget through the use of the E&D in the event there's a deficit in the forecast for the current year, as there was in the first forecast. So if we look at the first slide, and I won't go into all of the details because most of it's familiar to you. You can see at the bottom of the slide, I'm forecasting roughly $437,000 net favorable variance to budget before we begin to layer into COVID, and those are the components. So there's roughly $245,000 worth of salary, favorable variance, that health and dental premium holiday that I talked about, a favorable variance in our janitorial and student transportation contract, savings in our remote discount for regular bus. We've got Patty and I and her team work together, and we're forecasting a modest and unfavorable variance in special education tuitions and transportation costs, and then finally a little bit of savings through our SRO. I'll call it a contract with the towns. We didn't have the SRO in during the 31 days that we were in hybrid. So again, the net is roughly $437,000 favorable.
Jeff, can you remind me what the first line was for, the staff salaries increase to the title?
Sure. So we received a much more significant Title I grant this year, and we were able to use those funds to cover salary costs that we budgeted for in the FY21 budget.
Just can I ask about the special ed line? Is that just like students who we didn't know about before? Does it have anything to do with COVID, or is it
No.
just like population related?
So it's a combination of placements, evals, and transportation costs.
Okay, thank you.
So if you look at the kind of the P&L translation, in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see my little pointer here. You can see the $437,000 favorable variance that we talked about in expenses. Up in the revenue section, which is this top section, you can see that I'm showing a favorable variance in the fund transfers in line of $60,000, and that's basically 12 choice students times $5,000 a year. So if you recall, we didn't budget for any choice revenue, so I'm layering that in here. So on a net basis, pre-COVID, we're looking at a favorable variance to the original budget of roughly $497,000. So keep that kind of squirreled away. So now we're going to talk about the impacts of COVID, as we did during the October 7th meeting. This first line is substantially different than the same line in the first forecast that I prepared. It's significantly less. So we're forecasting the need for 18 classroom proctors versus 23 classroom proctors in the first scenario. And so we currently have 14 proctors and have a need for an additional 4. So the difference between the two forecasts is the number of proctors, and more importantly, the fact that we're seeing the proctors that we're hiring not taking health and dental benefits. Whereas in my original forecast, I was conservative, and I assumed that every proctor would take health and dental benefits. So out of the 14 that we've hired to date, only 3 have taken benefits. So 14 proctors at 149 days, and then I've got 4 proctors in at 100 days, and that's the net forecasted number cost, assuming the same run rate from a benefits perspective as well.
100 days, like it's less days because you haven't hired them yet?
We haven't hired them yet.
Because are they out there?
We're chipping away at it. They're really hard to find. But we've got a solid group of 14 right now. They're doing a great job for us. So, and it's really allowed us to continue to operate.
Thank you,
The next line is part-time hallway and calf monitors. So when we originally talked about this, the idea of that, we talked about 15 of them. Part-time was like 3.5 or 3.75 hours a day, not benefits eligible. We were unable to hire any. So basically what we've done is we've hired 4 college students to assist us during December and January, and then again in May and June. And then I've, in order to have staff on hand, particularly to clean the field house, our CAF, what we've done is we pivoted, Bill, and we hired
Sure you did.
5 additional part-time CAF monitors through our janitorial service, and that's allowed us to really do a tremendous job.
Top to bottom cleaning in 15 minutes.
I mean, it's unbelievable, the system that they have going on. So we've coupled those 5 part-time CAF monitors with 2 additional day porters to make a total of 3. And they go through that place like a whirlwind, and it's probably the cleanest area in the Tri-Town area. In between every single lunch, it's pretty neat to see. So the net impact of the 4 part-time CAF monitors and the 5 additional porters is almost exactly equivalent to what I had forecasted initially through the 15 part-time monitors. We're just skinning the cat in a different way, that's all. This next line, this $17,000, just shy of $17,000, we talked about that during the ratification of the paraprofessional MOU. So we needed to add 10 minutes per day per para, and that translated to an additional $17,000. I still have in our forecast 5 emergency COVID cleanings for the entire school at $3,500 a pop. We haven't had to COVID clean the whole school, but we've cleaned very specific areas in classrooms when needed. So as Mike talked about during his update, there hasn't been, fortunately, too many situations where we've had to call on that, but I'd like to leave it into the forecast for now. Daily bus disinfecting by our student transportation provider, a little shy of $23,000. So they sanitize every bus between every run with EPA approved solution with a 1-minute dwell time to kill the COVID. Okay, so the next 2 are new items. So
Can I ask something about
sure.
before you go on? So Masco runs buses before the Tri-Town.
In the morning, yeah.
And in the house, right? Like we're the
Yes.
first
Yep.
people on it,
Yep.
so are we 100% responsible for all the cleaning that happens?
No, we share. Yeah, we share. So I would assume that they would have an equal amount
Okay.
for the shared buses, and then they have additional dedicated buses in addition to the 28 shared buses. So their cost is substantially higher than ours. That just pertains to our 28 buses and our share of that. The next line is a placeholder for a tent for the months of April, May, and June. As you recall, we installed a tent on the backfield, huge tent. We didn't hold the circus, but it was, the longer it was there, the more heavily it was used, particularly by the Performing Arts Department. We call it Randy's tent. So, and Mike and I talked about this. I met with Randy a couple of times, and you know, the need's there, the desire to have it's there, and we thought it would be great to have.
Would that be used for like graduation also?
No. So the next
Next
item,
line.
thank you for bridging to my next item. So our executive leadership team has talked about that issue a number of times. And I've reached out to my contacts and received a quote for an even bigger tent, so that we could hold a well-done, legitimate high school graduation on June 4th on the football field under a tent virtually the same size as a football field that would seat 800 people socially distanced. And that's,
if you were at Boxford
town
Town
meeting.
Meeting, it's about the same size as Boxford Town Meeting.
that's massive.
It's big.
So it comes at a pretty steep cost, as you can see.
Yeah.
So, you know, the tent, the chair rental, and all the bells and whistles, the small stage, all those kinds of things.
And how, is that for one day use, or
That would
will
be-
it be up more than one day?
Typically, so the way we did it in the previous district I was in, and I coordinated the same type of event, we would set it up with earlier in the week of the festivity and of the graduation itself, and then the high school would use the tent for all of the other festivities that lead up to graduation. And then we'd have graduation, and then it would come down the next day. So it was almost solely dedicated to the graduation, the extended event of graduation, not used for other things, but it could be used for other things.
Was it a similar cost?
Uh,
Or
it-
is this a COVID cost?
No, their pricing really hasn't changed much. The tent is a third of the size of the one that I have here, because we need to socially distance. Yeah,
So what
it's
I'm
massive.
thinking is, one of the things you hear after graduation each year when it's 100 degrees and everybody's in the gym is that they'd love to have an outdoor, this is pre-COVID obviously,
Yeah.
an outdoor ceremony. So I'm just thinking like way ahead. If people get attached to the tent, are you saying that if we're not socially distancing in 2022, the tent would cost less if we did do an outdoor?
So that, yes, it would cost less. The tent that we used in Hamilton Wenham for a graduating class of less than 200 was, the setup was $24,000 a year.
And there's a lot that goes with that. We have the traditional like all-night grad party, and I'm not getting
Right.
into that, but it's, okay.
Right, so the thinking around this was that even with the vaccine and, looking preliminarily at the schedule, it's unlikely that we'll be able to put, 800 people in the field house, right?
Yeah.
And then we look back at what we did last year, and it was great given the circumstances, but we want to do better. And, we
We
all.
lucked out with weather and things like
Oh, we
that.
did,
so-
but and it was also, the sun was kind of brutal, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we all felt
I'm
very
still
strongly
burned.
that this was the way to go for FY, for this graduating
Yeah,
class.
no, I'm just getting ahead of myself, so sorry. But it would mean the ceremony would be during the day and not at night, or you don't know,
Evening.
could be evening, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
How many normally fit in
For mosquitoes.
That's what I was thinking.
The capacity of that space is,
Bigger than.
oh, huge.
It's a lot. I mean, this is, the social distancing becomes the issue
Right.
with anything that we do here. But again, it's sort of using the example of Hamilton One, we didn't have tickets.
Right.
Everybody, you know, there was,
Anybody that wanted to come.
anybody who wanted to come could just come. I mean,
Which
so,
right, they could say outside of it.
right.
Yeah, that's the advantage of
We
it.
had enough we had chairs, and then, yeah, and then you could stand around the outside of it, so, yeah, the social distancing piece will be what really limits the number.
And that's good to have chairs there, so it actually does socially distance,
Right.
Yeah, they would be set up so
Set up.
socially distanced.
rather than asking
Right.
people to socially
Yeah,
distance
right.
I mean, this will probably, because we're limited in the number, we'll definitely have tickets and probably assigned seats, I would think, too,
Right.
possibly.
We'll have a small stage, not a big stage for a bunch of people to sit up on the stage, like a traditional graduation. It would be more than likely, you know, the stage, the principal, and whoever else is usually up there, and then just an opportunity for the student to come up
To
and
walk. Yeah.
to walk up, and that's it. Yeah.
Right.
In a typical year, you know, non-COVID, you're probably looking at 10 to 15,000 less than that, but it's still a big expense.
But wouldn't we already have the typical expense budget for this year? Is that a trick question?
It's not a trick question. There's a little bit of money in the budget for graduation, nothing like this. And then the last item is simply a placeholder for what we don't know, which is a lot. We'll talk about grants in a couple of minutes. You know, the grant funding that we were provided through the various avenues was unbelievably great. And it allowed us to get the majority of the things that I think we needed to get. But I'm sure some things are gonna pop up and we're gonna need to buy them. And so that's what that 50 grand is for.
How have you found like the rate of consumption of PPE stuff? Like, has it been what you kind of expected, or are you like going through masks like crazy, or
Slower than I expected, only because we have fewer students here. So I was expecting, I figured 20% would be remote and 80% would be in the hybrid cohorts, split 50-50, and it's.
And forgetting the masks.
Yeah,
which
and
just
it's,
doesn't happen.
yeah, it's not even close to that.
I mean, the state told us budget 1 per student per week. So, for masks, but.
And I think I bought 100,000 disposable masks, like the ones Terry's wearing. But I mean, we're cranking through stuff. So on a net basis, I'm forecasting an additional $730,000 worth of COVID-related expenses that I just took you through. So Mike, if you flip to the kind of the financial statement piece of it, so the net impact of the savings that I talked about earlier and the additional costs is this negative $293,000 number here under expenses. And then here is the $60,000 additional revenue source from the school choice from the original pre-COVID slide. These top two items are from the preliminary FY21 cherry sheet that we got from the state. And then basically this number that I have circled here in red is kind of the plug, to go back to my original statements. That's the number that we would need to draw from E&D to balance the budget to zero. So that number is roughly $500,000 less than the amount that I originally forecasted on October 7th, and it's principally driven by the reasons. It goes back to the number of proctors and the health and dental benefits associated with those proctors. That's really the primary driver. So that's our forecast. I'll do another one in So we're 70 days into the year, 70 out of 180. So it's kind of early to.
Seems a lot
digging into
longer than that.
Feels like it, right?
It feels so much longer. It feels like 100.
Like 700.
Yeah.
700 out of 100.
Doing 110.
But there's still 180. So this is 180. So we're 70 into the 180.
Okay.
So it's a little early to do a really deep dive into like discretionary spend and all that kind of stuff. So, in each department and all that jazz. So I'll start kind of drilling down into those things in the next forecast, which I'll shoot for February.
Okay.
So I'll be a little bit more comfortable forecasting those kinds of things then. I don't anticipate our staffing to change much between now and then at all. So that's the forecast. So I'd like to give a brief update on the grants, and I'd like to thank some people. So this is kind of a summary table of the 4 or 5 major grants that we've been kind of managing through. So the first grant is the Coronavirus Relief Fund School Reopening Grant. It's that $225 per student that we got back in the summer from DESE. So our grant amount was $399,150. It had a spend deadline of December 30th. We've spent 100% of it. All of the detailed reporting that was required by the state and the federal government has been completed and submitted, and we've received about 90% of the money back already. The next grant is the RLTE Technology Grant. That was that competitive grant that Denny and I submitted, where we asked for hundreds and hundreds of Chromebooks, and they gave us 19 grand for 85 Chromebooks. Spending deadline of December 30th. I think I spent it the next day. So spending's complete. Unfortunately, we're still waiting to receive the Chromebooks 5 months later. And we've submitted all the paperwork and we've received the money back.
That's
So
just because it's not.
yeah, there's
The
just
demand is out of control, starting
unbelievable amount of demand
last
and
spring.
pent-up demand and all that
So
stuff.
do our students in the middle school have all the Chromebooks that they need?
Everybody has everything they need,
Okay.
teachers and students. And in the midst of this all, we had budgeted $130,000 to refresh the
Yeah, I remember.
high school teacher MacBooks, and
Yeah.
we did that.
You did do that?
We did that.
And you did get them?
We got them and we deployed them.
Okay.
Yeah. The next grant, the ESSER grant, we started talking about that back in the April-May timeframe. It was closely tied with Title I. We received a little over 32 grand. We used some of the money to partially fund our high school nurse, our second high school nurse, as we discussed. And then we used the balance, roughly $14,000, to provide some additional funds to our student services groups to allow them additional access to PPE and other types of things like assessments for the psychologists and those kinds of things. So the spending status is in progress, and the submittal status through the Department of Education is in progress. Okay, the next two, the CARES Act Relief Municipal Program for both Middleton and Boxford. So that is basically the equivalent of our Coronavirus Relief Fund School Reopening Grant. And you received some emails from a couple of us at the end of October around that. So thank you to Costa, to Carolyn, for assisting us and working with the two towns who were gracious enough to give us a sub-recipient grant totaling $270,000, which is a lot of money. So that really put us over the top and enabled us to get everything that we really needed so that we could finish out the year without drawing too much on our operating budget. So just like the first one, the school reopening grant, it had a deadline of December 30th, both of them. So we've spent every penny, and we've received, we submitted all of our detailed backup package to the town of Middleton about 2 weeks ago, and we will be submitting all of the information we need to submit to the town of Oxford by Tuesday. So my nighttime job is complete procuring all of this stuff. So there's a total of grants of just shy of $721,000. We used it to pay for the tent, the air quality study, which was a substantial investment, an unbelievable amount of PPE, an unbelievable amount of instructional technology, a significant investment in the things that Phil and his team were talking about in the form of instructional software that enable our teachers to, do the best they can. So we really put the money to good use, and we were fortunate to get it, and we appreciate the towns for helping us. So any questions on any of that?
I have a question on like the mechanics. So all of these expenses that the grant covered, they aren't shown up above in either operating or COVID?
It's completely separate.
There's like funds and you're running expenses against them over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have, if you think about it from an accounting perspective, I have an account for each of those 5.
Yep.
And then I run the expenses through each of those accounts, knowing that I can't go over it, and I have to spend it on the types of things that each of the grants allow me to spend it on. And then I have to substantiate all my expenditures through a very detailed submittal to each of the authorities that kind of lays out, $200 on this, $300 on this, $30,000 on this, and then you have to provide an explanation and proof in the form of a PO, quotes, and invoices.
Okay.
So it's
a lot of work.
It's a ton of work, and it's done.
That's
Thank
great.
God.
So when other people were online Christmas shopping at night, you were online COVID
Every
shopping?
single night.
Shopping for wipes.
From July until early December.
He knows where all the wipes are.
Every single wipe. And finding stuff was brutal.
And we asked you to sign up for us.
No problem. I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the warehouse
It's in Home Depot downstairs, yeah.
Is that PlayStation? You got one of those?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
Thing.
For you? Oh, yeah, 500%.
Well, there was, one other deadline that Jeff, did mention, for the towns to have, submitted a sub-grant to the district. That deadline was October 30th. So, after our in-person meeting in October, I had asked Jeff if he could put together sort of an estimate of what would be needed to get, through the year in the midst of him doing, everything else. That estimate, he was able to do like 2 or 3 days before the October 30th deadline. So to move forward, it was a very tight frame.
Yeah, but you made it happen. I have to,
Yes,
Costa
you did.
was the driving force to help us to get it across the goal line. So thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Costa. Thank you.
That's all I got.
Oh, okay. Hey, I do have one question I'm still on this grant stuff.
Yeah.
If there are expenses.
You can come in and help if you want.
I have no desire to help, but if there are, only because I got my own tracking program that I'm trying to do. If there are some expenses that this paid for that we're still going to have next year, like having
Those will be presented on January 20th.
as part of the budget, so we'll see it.
So they may not find their way into our recommendation, but they will find their way in front of you.
Okay, so we'll understand the request.
Yeah, there'll be a very, very long, substantial list of things that we need to think about, whether we want to include them in the operating budget or not. So a primary example would be the proctors, right? So we don't know where we're going to be in September, and we don't know, especially where a subset of our teacher group that are on an accommodation, if they'll be back or not. So that we'll have to have that conversation.
Sometimes it's nice to have a mask covering your face. Okay.
Do you know of other grants like this that are per 21? Like everything had to be, it seems like everything, like it's all at the end of this year. Like, you know, all the deadlines were by the end of 2020. So obviously the need for stuff, I mean, a lot of this was getting started, but the need for revisions, whatever they need for doctors or supplies are still happening. So are there other people that are saying like, hey, we're gonna do a grant for, you know?
I haven't heard anything specific.
Yeah, there may be, the Corona Federal Relief Acts, expired 12/31. You've seen in the news about a new COVID, relief package. That, I think will pass in some fashion before this Congress goes on recess, but I suspect that there will be another one sometime, in the spring, and that may address more of the kinds of things that you were talking about.
And in general terms, the one that they're discussing right now, there is a section in there for education. And what that actually means, we don't know yet. It could be $400,000. It could be $32,000. We don't have any details on it right now. And the other piece is the aid to state and local government is another huge piece of what we rely on. So if hopefully that gets put in there too, then that might help us as well.
So back to the forecast for this year, I'm not anticipating anything substantial. But I do agree with Costa that it's more likely than not that there'll be something there for next year. Whether it's as big as what we have here.
But we won't know about it when we certify the budget.
Right. We won't know about it until way down the road.
So it's gonna be really fun.
Oh, it's going to be really fun.
Fun's being acronym for something else.
Yeah, fun's a euphemism for something. A word I can't say.
Yeah, there's going to be so many more unknowns.
Right.
So we
have no idea.
Costa talked about it at the last meeting, right? So revenue, we don't know.
We have no idea what we're hybrid in the fall, hopefully not, but are we normal?
Costa talked about the state's committed a huge chunk of the rainy day fund to this year. What happens, after July 1st when that money isn't there anymore?
Yeah, the state had its consensus revenue meeting today.
Right.
An uptick in revenue from the adjusted FY21 revenue,
right,
which probably doesn't add up to the FY20 revenue. So
now the good news from a forecast perspective, Mike, could you go back one slide? So the good news in all of this is that this number right here is way less than we originally anticipated, right? So if you recall, we certified E&D at the end of last year at 2.1 million. We gave 300K back to the towns in November because we had to, because we were over the statutory limit. That left us with 1.8 million. Now, let's just say we're going to use 250K just to make the math easy, right? So now you got $1,550,000 left. So, and let's assume that carries to next year. That's a substantial amount of money that is there if we need it. To me, that makes me feel good that we're not using 800,000 here.
Which is what you showed us in
What the
October, it was
original
nearly
was,
800,
yeah.
and we were all like, okay.
Which still would have left us with $1 million.
Yeah, right.
But now hopefully if this holds true or gets better, we'll still have $1.5 million, $1.6 million left over to recertify for next year in the event we need it. And that's what it's for. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, it's just so interesting because when we did the budget last year, we had no idea really what was happening, right? And so now we know what kind of the world is. It's obviously completely different than what we were thinking last year.
Right.
So now we're going to try and build that into our budget for some unusual aspects of education.
Jeff, thank you for all that
Oh, no
work
problem.
and all the
Yeah,
other work.
thank you.
Oh, yeah, night shopping.
Okay.
Now I gotta focus
Everybody's
on-
getting PPE for
now I
Christmas.
gotta focus on the answer. I gotta get her a present.
How does she feel about box fans?
Air purifiers.
I'm gonna sell the
Get that
Xbox
pile of
I've
box
got for
fans.
the bill, so.
Right.
That's a good one.
I don't think she wants masks.
No.
Yeah. No, she does not want
No,
masks.
unless
Let's
they're
be clear.
diamonds.
She still doesn't want them.
No, she doesn't.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.
All right, we'll move on to item H, the October 1st enrollment report.
Okay. Second to make it big enough so they can read it. Okay. So this is the October 1st enrollment report that we then use to create the apportionment calculations for all three of the towns. As you can see there, that we have listed out going back to October of 2014, our student enrollment through October 1, 2020. So the total Masconomet enrollment for 2020 was 1,727 students. That is down 39 students from the October 1, 2019 enrollment. Anything else I wanted to touch base on that? It's down 245 students. It still continues sort of that trend that we're seeing year over year, the 5-year trend. The 1 year is a 2.2% decrease, so we're looking at a 12.5% decrease over a 5-year period. So we also have the other half of this report shows the kindergarten enrollment through grade 6 in the Tri-Town, so we can take a look back and see what's coming up. The thing I kind of see as interesting is that there was a decrease in this one in every grade, going from October 19 to October 20. So that trend of decreasing enrollments seems like it's going to continue for us in the foreseeable future.
So just with regard to the 5-year change, the 12.4%, I know that we have, within those 5 years, we have reduced staff along the way. I just want to mention that to anyone who's listening. It was a few years ago. Just so people know that we do keep a close eye on this and we'll continue.
I mean, just in this year's budget, 21 versus 20, if you recall, we reduced total staffing by 11, which included two teaching positions.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And then it was a few years ago that there was.
It was 3 years ago. There was another right sizing.
Yeah.
In terms of staffing.
Yeah.
And as we kind of go into putting together the budget recommendation for the end of next month, we'll again be having those discussions of, okay, given what's happened over the last couple of years since that last reduction, and where we see things headed, what's the right size for our staffing. So those are the two pieces there for this sheet. So going on to the next page, where we then break the enrollment down by town. You see Boxford at 622 students, Middleton at 604, and Topsfield at 486. We also have 3 faculty children in our classes right now, grades 8, 9, and 11. And then new column this year is the 12 choice students that we enrolled and that Jeff talked about already is $60,000 in revenue that was nice to have that we weren't budgeting for. So those students are now part of the district, and we should expect that hopefully they'll stay on and graduate. So it's another discussion we'll have to have a little later on this year is, do we continue to accept school choice students in a what grade? And you can see the Tri-Town Union numbers are down the second half of the page. And then there's next page in here, I won't read this. This is Jeff's letter to the towns, cover letter, which is then leads us to the actual apportionment calculations. You can see there the numbers I read out there for Boxford, Middleton, and Topsfield, and total number of students. And this is where we have an overall decrease, however, not equally distributed across the 3 towns. So Boxford has decreased 41 students, Middleton has a decrease of 13 students, and Topsfield is actually increasing by 7 students. So then when we look down to the next part of this table, which is the actual assessment percentages, see if for FY22, we're looking at a 36.33% for Boxford, 35.28% for Middleton, and 28.39% for Topsfield. For Boxford, that's a decrease of 1.36%. For Middleton, it turns out to be an increase of 0.2%. And for Topsfield, it's an increase of 1.16%. And so those are the percentages that we use to calculate the FY22 assessment. And so before Topsfield spends $1, their percentage of our total budget is going to go up 1.6%. So it's not the total budget, it's the assessed amount of the budget.
Again, right, because last year.
Because it was a similar.
So well over $100,000 will
Over
shift
100,000
essentially from Boxford to Topsfield
Right.
before we even begin to talk about increases to our operating budget, just through the math that's prescribed in the regional agreement.
Right. I think we'll talk probably a little later on about some of the policy working groups meetings with some of the finance committee members in the towns to talk about, do we change this model that we're looking at right now?
Immediately.
Retroactive.
Doesn't work retro, but immediately.
Nice try, Philly.
Gotta try.
That's it.
Any questions? Because we will continue to be talking about this as part of the budget. All right, moving on to I. Proposal to add Indigenous Peoples' Day to the school calendar. Tasha's going to talk to that.
Yeah, so we had a really interesting conversation this past Monday. Bonnie has put together a whole bunch of different articles, kind of positives and negatives. And for 3 people who I think were pretty much going one way to begin with, we kind of all ended up in a what? So we don't actually have a recommendation. It's something really interesting to think about when you think about Columbus Day, right? Which it's been known now that Columbus wasn't necessarily the nicest person. However, Columbus Day really began more as a celebration of Italian immigrants and their heritage. So when they were immigrating to the U.S., they weren't treated well, as many immigrant groups aren't. And so this was kind of put in to give them an opportunity to celebrate. It just happens to be called Columbus Day to celebrate a guy that, was doing a bunch of bad things. So we really love the idea of celebrating an immigrant population. We don't necessarily like the idea of celebrating this one individual, but we also wanted to celebrate the people that were there before any of us. So it's kind of like it's all getting. We had kind of been going with let's just do a slash, but then it's like you're kind of celebrating the persecutor and the persecutees all in one line, which just felt weird. So that's kind of where we landed. Like we're like, I don't know what our recommendation is. I don't know if you guys who were there had other thoughts. So I think we were gonna marinate on it a little bit more as we. It was just a very interesting thing. We're like, oh, how easy is that to be Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day? And it wasn't. So I don't know if people have opinions on it.
Yeah, I think that when you begin to examine what something should be called, whether it's a day, a building, or anything else, you have to ask yourself, am I judging it by the standards that at the time that person lived, the standards at the time that this building or day was named, or today's standards? And you might get 3 different answers.
Exactly.
And if you begin doing that, then I think you have to examine everything, even the name Masconoc.
Well, that's awful though. It's not, it's not going to not happen. So, but it just felt weird putting them together, honestly. And it's not like we can change, and we were wanting to come up with our own holiday.
Festivus.
Right.
Right.
Let's just have a.
That's what it was to add one, and we can't do that.
Right.
Tasha, has your committee heard from any of our students? For a lot of these, it would be very interesting if they were student-driven, especially because we're a school.
Well, are we really? So part of this meeting, we had like an hour to discuss this, and then the next hour we had a presentation from 3 student clubs, of which I was going to ask them, and then we didn't because it just went really long. It was then like another hour and a half. So we had the, might as well just continue, and then you can take me off of an update, but we had the.
Excellent.
We had the pleasure of hearing from the ACE Club, which is the
Appreciating cultures and ethnicities.
The Women Gender Study Club and the GSA Club. So they had, I think there was probably about 10 or so students that came onto our call.
Okay.
With there are about 3 advisors. 3 advisors. 1 does women, gender, and GSA, and then 2 for the ACE Club. And they all had it well prepared, and they had times to speak and that's, they had a nice little order. And I think we were all blown away. We were blown away on several levels. They were incredibly articulate, put together, spoke about really deep issues, and they did that very well. But then we were also blown away in a negative response because we heard about a lot of incidents of racism. It felt more like they were microaggressions consistently. Like it seemed like a lot of smaller stuff, which they were saying was, obviously a bigger issue over time, right? So it wasn't as much overt stuff and more of the covert microaggression. but we're gonna continue to talk to them. So that's why it felt like asking them this question, it was just gonna be like, and while we're at it, it just didn't seem like it made sense in that moment. But yeah, it was really great to have them. You guys have any comments to add to that?
Just that the students that spoke were awesome. And I think it was disheartening to hear what they were saying. It was very disheartening. But I had to tell them that Masco's doing something right to produce such extraordinarily intelligent and well-organized, and I hate to use the word articulate for a lot of reasons, but well-spoken young people. I mean, absolutely blown away by it. And the things they said were just very moving. So I think that we had a long meeting, so it definitely needed to be wrapped up and not ask any more questions at that time.
So had you invited those groups to talk to you as far as, okay.
So we had done this about a month ago.
So I'm wondering if it would be worth it to invite like the student council or some part of it, or SABs to a future meeting, and maybe in between they could reach out. I'm back on the Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah, there are, so I've heard from, and I know Bonnie had talked to her as well, from a student that's part of this Tri-Town Solidarity Group, which is part of the alum group.
Oh, great, yep.
And I know she wants to bring some of, so people like her that aren't in one of these three groups to our meeting and set up a time to do that. So yes, whether it be that way, I don't know if we do like some kind of a survey. We were kind of fried at the end of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were. But I think I think there was a very important evolution of our thinking on this. We didn't want to just do a knee-jerk reaction. Well, of course we should change it, and just assume it, and only really consider this at a very, very high level and not really delve into it. We said, let's take our time and actually research this a little bit. And when we did, then the whole question became more nuanced. And we will discuss this at our next meeting. My initial reaction is, I think I wouldn't want to throw this out to a poll or anything, because most of the people that would be responding to it wouldn't have had the benefit of the research that we did, and would just be reacting to it based on a very high level of understanding about it, and really haven't looked into it that well.
So there should be linked to our agenda.
So I think we're gonna marinate on it.
So you're not making sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that we also did, it did come up in the meeting too, that this is a debate that they have in classes, that, in the 8th grade classes, they do a debate about what should Columbus Day be called, and it would be really cool to tap, to tap into that a little bit more in our marinating process, and really engage the students on it, so.
Right in that student improvement plan for the middle school.
Right. Another nice thing, just really briefly, about the student clubs is that they weren't all people that were there speaking to us. Were not all seniors or juniors. Like the ACE club leaders were both sophomores. So
that's fantastic. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of sophomores, freshmen or two. But it was really nice because
this will help, because this is gonna take a few. Well, it may take a while.
They seemed really like they were, this was passionate, they were passionate about what they were talking about, they knew a lot about it. And it was eye-opening, so.
Did you have any discussion on the ability of someone, not the federal government, to change the name of a holiday? In fact, as long as there's a federal holiday.
Yeah, we had talked about it as, other people had done it as easily as putting it on the calendar. So we're not changing anything. We would just be changing the way Masco reports it. Topsfield, one of their elementary schools did that. The principal said, I'm going to call it Indigenous Peoples' Day, and so it was.
She hasn't been arrested yet, so. Of course, after this, who knows?
So Costa, also just to note that, I was looking at one article, so I'm not sure if this is the up-to-date numbers, but 6 states and about 100 municipalities that have changed it. So you're right, it's something that was a question we did think about, and that would be like being an official state municipality. That's another avenue that maybe students would want to take with their towns, right? But I think if any of you guys are curious, the link in the agenda that has the resources that this committee put together, Bonnie, was really helpful. It's worth taking some time to dig into.
And one of the links is to the ACE Club's website, which is amazing that they were highlighting different holidays, and they were actually highlighting Native American Heritage Day, which is also known as Black Friday. And so that's also there too as part of the whole conversation. So it's a good resource.
Yeah. Hoping that they do December, like doing it by the month and just little known holidays that people don't necessarily know and what we need.
That's our update too.
Yes, it is.
I said that.
So can I make one more?
Yep.
Just with the students, again, I agree, like, when they started and the time kept going and we were all like, I don't care, what they're saying is right. Was really made a big impression upon all of us, I think. But one big takeaway, it wasn't even just those club members. There was a student there who's not a member of any of those clubs who had witnessed an incident that made him feel concerned about his peers. And sort of my takeaway from a lot of what they said, if I were to put it in a nutshell, was that what hurts one of us hurts all of us. Their message wasn't like, I feel oppressed because I'm different and I want everyone to. No, it was when anyone in our community is being microaggressed toward consistently, it's going to hurt the whole culture, the whole community. It hurts everyone who observes it and doesn't know how to handle it, which is why they want the conversations and the trainings so that everyone feels more prepared and equipped when these things do happen, because clearly they've been happening, on how to handle it, what to do, where to go, who to talk to, how to respond, what's appropriate, what's not, how to identify what they're comfortable doing, what they're not comfortable, those types of things. So we are already talking about all that stuff. So that was there. So we're already in that track, and NASCO has done things and will continue to. So that would be my nutshell of how the students presented it.
Yeah, they also made a really great point about preventative measures, that idea of professional development and training. That's not necessarily only in response to something, but that, that should be an ongoing focus for us. And
actually, I think we heard from one very alumni about how the responsive measures, might be related to me or not, but how the responsive measures actually highlight you as someone different. So if you're in an assembly that's put together as a result of some racist act, how if racist act was against purple people, and you happen to be purple, you're going to feel like all eyes are on you, whether or not they are, and feel guilty and ashamed and all these other negative emotions. So, we had 2 alumni, which was nice. One actually came to tap into our resources And that one tapped into another one who then popped up.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Thank you.
So anyway, thank you.
I just want to ask, was there anything specific that was brought up that needs to be followed up by the administration? Like anyone?
Mike was there for the whole.
Okay, all right, okay.
meeting.
You got it? Okay.
So you're
My
not making a
mom-
proposal today to do
There's
anything?
no
Yeah,
proposal,
okay.
there's more marination.
Okay, got it.
And, yeah, I like the idea of bringing in more students to talk about what they think. I like the idea of the class.
Thank you, Tasha and Bill and Tony. All right, I am going to go to the subcommittee reports. We'll start with, and I would, if possible, like to keep them to 5 minutes each, max. So, Melissa, would you like to do policy?
Sure. So last Thursday, we had policy subcommittee meeting where we invited representatives from the Board of Selectmen and Finance committees from each of the 3 towns. We presented the existing district agreements, our proposed amendments, and we had a little bit of a discussion. I thought the meeting went well, and the changes were well received. We're sending it back to the towns to discuss, and then we're meeting again on Thursday, January 14th at 7 p.m. And we agreed to provide them with the past historic enrollment so that they can make their own determination as to what would be better for start. I think everyone was in agreement that we should do an average apportionment. The question, there's outstanding questions are, when do we start? And when we start, do we jump into a 5-year, or do we do a more tiered plan where the first year is the averages the prior 2 years, and then we do it so graduated, so we're up to 5 years. I think it's 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I have to thank Costa for a lot of the resources that he provided to us. I think this is his passion project. Just something that he
It was well received, so
but,
good job.
Yeah, it was very well received. And what we're going to do is give them the NASDAQ projections for enrollment for the 3 towns in the Massachusetts Regional School District, so that they can take our enrollment average forecasting, plug in the numbers, and sort of figure out what works for them, and they can see that starting at graduated, and it may be the smoother route, as the finance person, member from Middleton said, it would be the smoother route to accomplishing what we believe is the right thing to do, but not giving people huge bumps in the road to start with. So what we discussed was starting this in fiscal year 23. So, but that's also, the start date is up for discussion as well. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything from that.
I think, everyone agreed that ending with, a 5-year average is a good thing. It's, how do you get there? Do you continue with, a year at a time until a designated point and then immediately jump to 5 years? Or do you go 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years until you get there? And I think if you look at the numbers, I think it will be easy for people to come to the conclusion that one wave provides a smoother path than the other. The other amendment that was talked about was changing the payment of the assessment from quarterly to monthly. The Middleton town administrator, treasurer, and CFO are all in agreement that it would not represent any hardship to Middleton other than you put it on 12 warrants instead of 4. Oxford and Topsfield are checking with their finance teams to see what impact, if any, is on their towns.
Yeah, we didn't, but I mean, I came away with a good feeling that everyone was willing to work together for a common goal of making the process of the enforcement easier on everyone's budget.
That's great.
Yeah.
I felt the same way, Melissa. It was nice to have a meeting like that. Everybody was working on this.
And then, we actually had our first meeting with Mass, or wasn't our first meeting, but it was our first review meeting with Mass on Tuesday. We had a 2-hour meeting, which we're going to do monthly, and we're gonna go through the policy manual handbook sheets, one by one, or section by section. We got through sections A, and then part of section B, or half of B.
That's pretty good for 2 hours.
Yeah,
Right?
it was pretty, yeah. We got into B anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess they get harder as they get more complicated as you go on, but.
There's some questions that we'll have to bring to the committee that we'll present to the committee after our second meeting. Just more having to do with what is the preference, like if there's something that just repeats a state law, do we want it in our policy? And the sort of consensus of the group there was that we probably don't, unless it's something that's important enough for our policy, our vision, and our goals. And then we have a couple of placeholders and things that we have to look at. So we'll do another review on January 19th. It's Tuesday, it'll be from 2 to 4. And I think at that point, we'll be at least able to present section A for approval after that.
So Melissa, when you guys are ready to do that, if you could let me know, so we'll make it a separate agenda item rather than a subcommittee update, because if it's gonna take longer, I'd rather it have its own agenda item and then the updates can just be.
Sounds good. Yeah, I don't know if we'll be ready for the January 20th meeting, but we'll be ready for that.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you. Community engagement with Bonnie.
Okay, so we had a listening session on Monday, and so I'll just try to summarize that, and then I'll do the rest. We actually had a listening session and followed by the rest of our meeting. We had a lower number of people there. We had about 17-ish, and only one community member spoke. What she spoke about was her concern for the mental health of our students, especially special ed students, but also all students. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. She was talking about there being a rise in students failing, sometimes failing every class, and expressed that her sense that the kids need help. Some of the things that she talked about that she felt were associated with the problem are Blackboard, the challenges we've talked about before about being able to connect really well through Blackboard, especially the video conferencing. The school feeling somewhat disjointed because of a lack of common language and scaffolding for this realm of basically SEL. Masco not successfully accommodating or making education really truly accessible for all students, and the need for required professional development in this area for the general education teachers and staff, not just special ed, and that type of PD should be really, have address things like executive function and trauma-informed education, best practices. So she was concerned. She asked that we look at the numbers of how many kids are failing. Mentioned the increase in hospitalizations that we've had this fall, and she noted that Masco has great resources in our school, and that there is a lot of evidence of the staff trying to help keep kids afloat. but, you know, she was expressing a concern, feeling that Masco should be doing better in this area and look into it more, what we can do.
So Bonnie, just along those lines,
Yeah.
Betty has agreed to give a student wellness update at our next meeting at the beginning of January, just to kind of respond to.
Okay, oh, perfect, that's great. That's awesome, thank you. That's good, because we are trying to tie the listening and what we're hearing and, you know, to, you know, how we're responding, so thank you for that. So that was the listening session, and then in our meeting, we're basically discussing two items. Reaching out to community members to be Masco ambassadors is kind of the term we're going with now. Ideally, sort of a mix of people with and without students currently at Masco, to be informed and engaged about the budget and the big picture of home value and quality of life and the role that public education plays and Masco plays, and with an interest in Masco. So that idea, that aspect of community relations. And then also the idea of facilitating connections between Masco students and our community through potentially some type of event. We've talked a lot about, you know, it's come up several times in this subcommittee about an event, and we're feeling like the end of the school year is potentially the best time. Obviously this year, you know, it's challenging, so maybe it's virtual, maybe it's hybrid, but the idea is to really help create that bridge between what's happening at Masco and making the community at large more aware, and helping the kids feel that sense of engagement with their community, and giving back to the community through that connection. So how an event can happen to in the big picture. So we're just going to be exploring that some more. We decided to meet on Monday, January 11th at 6:30. This will be a regular meeting without the listening session. So please join us if you are up for it, and we're happy to hear any thoughts on any of those things we're looking into.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, when you talked about these, you know, ambassadors and, you know, talking about, you know, schools and home values, yeah, it's a good thing, but they, you know, it can't be the same message for all three towns. Because in Middleton, only about 63% of the households are in single-family homes. And much of the rest of the housing doesn't produce kids. So there isn't, for those people, there isn't that clear connection between quality of school system and home value. It's tax rate and home value. So the message has to be a little different there to have success. And because the three towns are different, especially Middleton, you know, kind of the message has to be kind of tailored.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, you said about this parent speaking, and I know we'll hear more from Patty, but when you talk to kids that are failing a lot, they, you know, how like the honors and the high honors things come out in the newspaper, and I was looking at them to see if it was much smaller this year, and they weren't. They were virtually, or if they were much higher, and they look fairly similar. But have you been hearing this, that a lot of kids are failing? I mean, it could have been like getting all A's were failing, but so I wouldn't.
So I think it depends on the type of kid.
It depends. I mean, it's we did some preliminary look at the high school, and there's actually more A's than there was first quarter last year, but there are also more F's. So yeah.
Not a lot of B's and C's.
Yeah, those are the numbers that went down, but the B's and C's went down about the same number that the A's went up.
And it's not necessarily the kids that regularly hit the honor roll that we're talking about here.
No. I was just trying to see if more kids got A's, which therefore they would make the honor roll, right?
I thought there were more names than in the past. My daughter looked at it, she's like, "Whoa, what's happening?"
Well, my son saw a few like names that aren't normal names. It's like all excited for it.
Oh, that's nice. That is good to hear. That's good news.
Yeah, so we saw some more, but it wasn't like what I would have expected if there was one.
Okay, all right. Zilly, budget.
I will just say, I know you already mentioned it, but I do think it's important, if anybody's still listening, to hear that there will be a response to that comment at the next meeting from our administrators, but some of the data to really understand the landscape of things and looking for our student body based on those kinds of feedback is coming. Okay, so budget. So we met on December 9th. That was our first meeting of the year. We spent about the first 2/3 of the meeting discussing athletic fees, and then the last third talking generally about the plan and the process for the budget. You are all aware from a couple of emails that people have copied on probably, and if you weren't aware of attendance at this meeting, there were parents who would have a lot of concerns about the fact that the Masconama athletic fees, when compared with other districts in the area, are quite a bit higher. It varies depending who you're comparing to, but it could be anywhere from like a quarter higher to double what you see someplace else. And also they noted that there's no family cap or multi-sport cap at Masconama. So I shared the background of how the athletic fee structure is set up at Masco, which you all have understood. I don't need to get into the details of that here. That'll be in our minutes. And said that we would dig in a little bit further to understand more if there are any reasonable or feasible adjustments in the near term or the long term. If that makes sense, if that discrepancy is really, I mean, it is that it is higher than most other districts. But also with research, and I think we're the only school that I could find that does not have a family cap. Whatever might have a different name. So we're going to look further into that. I did ask for parents who might be interested in collaborating to give me their emails. I got about 10 emails, and 9 of them formally, and we'll follow up more on that in our next upcoming meeting. Based on that, I'll come back to all of you once the budget subcommittee has really discussed it. If there's any suggestions or thoughts based on what the administration may also have to say about it. I think that about covers that. And then moving on to the process for the budget development in general. I haven't seen that many notes really about that. I think that the calendar was sent out to all of us by Jeff with the updated dates on when we're meeting and kind of what we're doing. So one thing that did come up was that we missed hearing directly from the department heads in the process last year. We understood why that was a little different last year, but we're going to bring that in with a slightly different scope. It's not going to be so much tell us all the story of your life, and it's going to be more targeted, kind of to Costa's point, like what's not working, what do you no longer need that maybe has changed for budgeting purposes, and then just also what they need, making sure we're attuned to what the department heads really need. I don't want to say department heads, the school and all the different operating. I think that's it for my update. You were there.
I was there.
budget process itself ramps up for Jeff in January, right?
So there'll be a lot more.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Zoe. DCI's not doing anything right now.
The only thing with anti-racism that I would like to pop in is just that we didn't set any date, so I'm considering January 11th and 25th, or to get back on the,
And you do that at, well, like during the day?
at 2.
At 2. That's great that you were able to get the kids at 2.
That's the
Yeah, 3.
Ah, that's why they came in halfway through. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's why
They
we
weren't
had two
skipping
different
school.
discussions, yeah.
In front of the superintendent. All right, lastly, we have liaisons to the elementary school committees. Tasha's going to be, I think, Tasha, you offered to be the official liaison for Hamilton. It's fine if you don't have that. Okay. Terry was kind enough to offer to do it for Boxford.
Yeah, I don't have an update
It's
either,
fine.
sorry,
There's
but yes,
no-
I will do that. I'm
there's
just
no
trying to figure out
pressure
the right
here.
person to, yeah.
Okay, and then I don't think we have an official Topsfield person unless I missed an email.
I started to reply just because I've done it and they're
I know.
easy. So I really don't mind it. With them, they put summary notes up, so I can just glance at those, but any one of us could do that, so. I don't want to, I actually don't want to do it, I just haven't replied to that even.
Oh, well, I'm thinking next, yeah, it might make sense to have Melissa start doing it so that you get familiar with it as well as, is that all right, Melissa? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and that can be as simple as just introducing yourself and then like, you guys can send emails back and forth if something comes up that you think is going to affect the other school or that we should know about.
Oxford actually does summary notes too, which is,
That's
I
great.
should have thought of that, but yeah.
So we could actually all read them, but it would be nice if you read them.
Right, yeah,
Okay, all right.
no
Thank you.
problem.
All right, going on to the consent agenda, 2 items. The first is approval of the December 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes. The second is warrants of $1,997,844.79, signed since December 2nd, 2020. Thank you. Zilly seconded. All in favor, you can raise your hand. All right, that's unanimous, okay.
The simple pleasure in life.
Yeah, I know, right? You and Barbie between. Okay. All right. Well, yes, please.
No.
No? Oh, I have to read the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I read
Yes,
it.
you do.
Oh, can I do it? I'm sorry. I appreciate you.
I looked at the clock and I was like.
Getting out of here.
Let's get it in.
Okay. I move to adjourn into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy relative to collective bargaining with the Masconomet Teachers Association. Executive session purpose number 3. I've determined that holding this discussion in open session may have a detrimental impact on the district's bargaining position.
So actually say we will not return to open session.
We will not return to open session. Zilly is seconding. Do I need to do roll call?
Yes.
All right, roll call. Terry?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Tasha?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Zilly?
Yes.
Verite?
I think I heard yes.
Okay, no response. And Carolyn, yes. All right, we will move to executive session and we can
Jay.
discontinue the streaming. Thank you.